welcome to Scorched Earth and a general reading for the sign of Aries, Sun, Moon or Ascendant for the month of December. I hope you are well. I'm using the Llewellyn Tarot for you today. Here it is. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. If the reading resonates with you and you'd like to go a little bit deeper, there will be an extended that you can access at the end. That is the first link in the description box. The second link in the description box is to the 6-month overviews that I have completed for each of the signs running, obviously, from January to June 2023. They are running at roughly 3 hours a piece, so they are quite detailed. And I think they're well worth the money if you would like to check that out. Like I said, second link in the description box. And the third link is to my private community, the Order of the Phoenix, over on Circle. One of the benefits of that is if you join at the mid-tier, then you get access to all of the extended readings that I do for no extra cost. So that includes things like the 6-month overviews, but it also includes the monthly extendeds for all of the signs. It's not just limited to one. So quite cost effective. And on top of that, there's a really brilliant community of people who are all there being supportive of each other, introducing each other to new modalities, new ideas, new philosophies. And if that sounds interesting to you, then please do feel free to drop on by. Third link in the description box. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, let's see what's going on with you, Aries. Could I have 3 cards for Aries, please? Thank you. We have the 10 of Pentacles in your recent past. About current energy, please. We have the Tower. Okay. And what's coming towards Aries, please, for December? Thank you. We have the King of Wands. That's strictly Leo energy, but it can be fire signs generally, so it can definitely be you. Could also be a Sagittarius. It's more about the energy than the sign that it represents. So it's about doing stuff, right? The one suit is all about doing stuff, living, experiencing, what you do and how you put yourself out there. We have at the bottom of the deck the Star, and this talks to it speaks to healing first and foremost. It speaks to connection, but it also speaks to the future and a return of hope. And I think with the cards that we're seeing here, it's possible that that's been perhaps in short supply for you of late. I'm going to use the Triple Goddess to clarify. I'll just give this a good shuffle. If it's any consolation, and I imagine it probably is not that much of a consolation, I think something like 3/4 of the signs that I've read for this month have had the Tower appearing in some way or another. You're certainly not being singled out. So let's have a look. Why is the 10 of Pentacles here for Aries, please? There's the first one. We have the 8 of Cups. About 10 of Pentacles. Oh, we also have the 6 of Cups and the 10 of Wands. King of Wands. There we go. Tell me about this Tower. Why is this Tower here for Aries, please? We have the Devil. And what about this? And we have the Empress. So what about King of Wands, please? Oh, shit. We've got the Ace of Cups in reverse. And we have the 9 of Wands. At the bottom of the deck, we have the Fool. And that's something really quite glorious to see. Because not only is it your card, Aries, and so that makes it, doubly important in the reading. But whenever we have cards that speak of endings, and we certainly have completion with the 10 of Pentacles there, we also have the Tower, and that's quite a big energy right there. But I mean, we're also coming close to it with the 9 of Wands. It's a step before the 10. Whenever we have these cards of completion, having something indicating that there is something new on the way, it's nice. It means that you're not stuck in that liminal space of, well, everything's fucked and everything's gone away, so what is there in the meantime? There's nothing, literally nothing. And I think if you haven't experienced a time where it's felt like everything has been ripped away and literally nothing's come in to replace it, and you're just kind of spinning in the darkness, then you're probably quite lucky. But I think most of us have had that kind of experience. And I think there's a potential for you to experience that if you are not mindful, I think, in your steps moving forward. Interestingly, we've got the 9 of Pentacles sitting underneath that, and also the 2 of Swords. Oh, look at this. flanked on either side. So we have the Emperor at one end, then the Two of Swords, then the Nine of Pentacles, and then the Fool. And actually the cards make even more sense when we look at them like that, because as well as being your card, the Aries card, excuse me, this is a card of control. And I think that what's falling away from here, what seems to be falling away here, is any sense of control by you. But then we do have this Two of Swords. We do have some sort of implied notion of there being something that you do not see here. And it's not that you don't see it because you can't see it. It's that you don't see it because you don't want to see it. Now, those can be the same thing, right? If it's happening on a subconscious level, and I do believe that it is deeply subconscious level for you, then we can be blinded to. So this is where our blind spots appear. You know, these are where our blind spots appear. But with the Nine of Pentacles and the Fool cards coming after it, it does seem like it's a month where the penny starts to drop. And where you feel like you don't have the resources, it seems to me that you will be shown that you do. And one of those resources is freedom. It's a lightening of the load, a lightening of the burden. It's being able to move more freely than you would have been, I think, in the restricted circumstances that you found yourself in here. Now, I'll just flip this around here so you can have a look at what I am seeing. Some people love being able to just look at the cards and not see my rubbery face. Other people are decrying the fact that they cannot see my rubbery face as well as they could before. I'm sorry, there's no way of pleasing everyone. We'll just have to try and flip between them. But anyway, in your recent past, you have the Ten of Pentacles. Now, this, generally speaking, speaks to material completion. Right? It can be about your house and home, it can be about your job, it can be about your business, it can be about anything that you've put a lot of, a considerable amount of effort into, and the returns that it may bring to you. It is also a card that talks about heritage and legacy, what you inherit and what you pass on. And that doesn't have to be material, because, as we know, I see the Pentacles as energetic currency, so it can be energetic inheritances. Quite often see generational karma coming through on that card specifically. Now, the other thing that it talks about is security and stability. And there's a sense here that you've had it, but for whatever reason you've walked away from it. Right? We've got that Eight of Cups at the bottom of the deck there. And we've got the Six of Cups and the King of Wands. Now, strictly, it's the Queen of Wands that should be your card. Well, that is your card. And I think that if you were in an energy where you were functioning positively, I guess that's the word that I want to use, then I feel like it would be the Queen of Wands that was showing up. But this skip to the King feels like there's lots of action, but there isn't as much of the consideration of the action before it as there should be. In some ways, what we've seen here is there's a walking away from something that has been very structured and very secure. And like I said, this can refer to a lot of different things, so you have to take it as it resonates to you. Be discerning in your consumption of tarot readings. Walking away from that and regressing in some point, where it seems like there's lots of action, but it's all going out in different directions. It doesn't feel like it has a focal point. And it's because of the missing Queen of Wands here. Two of Wands. Eight of Swords. It's like that there are decisions to be made. And these are probably important decisions and less important decisions. It seems like everything has a decision attached to it somewhere. But we also have this Eight of Swords, and it's kind of feeding into what we saw with the Two of Swords, in so much as there's a very, very narrow way that you are thinking about all of this. And I genuinely do feel like it revolves all around the action and not the contemplation of the action. To wit, then, coming at this as a shadow worker, as I am, what I see here is an attempt to to claw back what is secure, what is stable, what makes you feel safe. A point in the past. Without necessarily paying attention to the fact that things have changed, and they've changed for a reason, and what is the reason that they have changed. As we know, our external space tends to be a reflection of our internal space. So if everything is chaotic and maddening outside of you, and you're putting in lots and lots of effort and you're not getting anything in return, then perhaps it's because you need to stop and reflect. You know, the King of Wands for me is a really, really good card, generally speaking. But this seems like action for the sake of action. And in some ways a bypass of what's going on inside. You know, we've got the Nine of Pentacles at the bottom of the deck here with the Emperor. But notice how we've got the Seven of Swords sitting underneath that, right? There's a level of self-deception going on here. Oh, we've got another card as well. Didn't even see that. Empress. So the Empress is the archetypal mother. It is also the card of Taurus or Libra. Those two signs might be important to you. But I think it's really interesting that I didn't see that card initially. Like, all I saw was you. Because this kind of spreads the load a little bit. But it feels like for whatever reason, it's not being spread. I mean, this is about fertility and abundance and gratitude and having things. You know, it's an earthy card. It's very it's very earthy. It's comforting. It's stuff and things, but it's nature growing around us too. It's, you know, that ever moving cycle forwards. You know, the fact that she's been obscured by the Emperor and you are the Emperor makes me think that there's a lot here that you're not seeing. And it's coming from this place of self-deception, and it's a lot to do with your resources. You know, the Ten of Pentacles to the Nine of Pentacles is a step down. It's making things about you instead of just about everybody else. Well, just about everybody else. About what else is going on. Ten of Pentacles for me feels like community. So where we're stepping that down, it becomes about you and your resources. This is self-sufficiency and independence. I mean, it's a great thing. But looking at the way that these cards are all coming out here, I do feel like you're doing a lot for the sake of doing a lot. And you're avoiding looking at something inside of you as a result. Action for the sake of action, and bypassing a deeper message that's coming in here for you, you know? I mean, we'll certainly get into this more in the extended, but we'll move into your current energy, and we've got the Tower. Now, as we know, the Tower is quite often an unpleasant energy that hits when it's time for something to be taken out of our lives. And quite often when the Tower appears, it is because we've been given an opportunity to do something about this and we have resisted. It is that resistance that brings in the Tower. Because the universe sort of gets to the point where it goes, well, fuck, Aries isn't listening. I just need to batter them with it. I mean, it's a Scorpio card, but it's ruled by Mars, and so there's an Aries aspect to it here. But it speaks of utter chaos and pandemonium around you. You know, certainly that which you've walked away from here being amplified. If this is security and stability, and then we've got you walking away from this, well, we've got a huge fucking Tower here, which is looks to be unassailable. Actually, it looks like a fortress, except that it's getting battered here by waves. And as we know, water is emotion in the tarot, so there's a great deal of emotion around you here at this point. But we've also got these lightning strikes coming in. I mean, that Tower is not going to stand for much longer. It's an act of God here, bringing this down. It is the universe working here to bring this down, to show you where it is that you have felt like you are trapped, but actually you are not. You know, that Fool card is interesting. because it does talk about a new cycle, obviously, but it talks about travelling light. And you've been stuck in the tower for too long, Aries. You know, everything that you've got should be able to be put in this satchel, and you should be able to go off wandering with your cat, chasing whatever this is, bubbles, or some such thing that they're doing here, right? But instead, you've been trying to keep this tower up. I feel like this tower is talking to something that is deeply related to your identity. Like I said, it feels very, very strong to me. Yeah. That what's happening here is trying this card came out in meditation for me. I knew it was going to come out at some point, and we'll talk about it. I just wanted to let you know that it was coming. What was I saying? Oh, identity. There's some part of you that is being really challenged here, and you are resisting as hard as possible dealing with it. Now, it could be that part of your identity is that you don't give up. And we see that with this card, right? It's a card of resilience, but I always think he might be resilient physically, but look at the expression on his face. This is somebody who looks haunted. He looks hunted. This is somebody who is waiting for the next attack. It's somebody who's hyper-vigilant, you know, and always ready to fight, even when they are not in a position to really be, you know, fighting. They're not operating at optimum health. You can see he's all bandaged up. It's like what this person actually needs is rest. What this person actually needs is to submit to the tower and submit to what is being highlighted as no longer relevant on their path. Now, I feel like there was a physicality to this, right? There was a materiality to this. So home, job, business, that sort of thing. It's something emblematic of security and stability to you that you have come away from. But this here seems to be hitting on a level that is so much deeper. It's like stuff first, now you. We've got the Chariot coming up here. And I think it's beautiful the way that that's showing up here, because it's the point of integration between these two things. So we'll come to the Hanged Man a second. I had a whole thing in my head about the Hanged Man and what he was demonstrating for you, which is, my mind is fucking just wiped all of a sudden by the shock of seeing it, because I knew it was coming out. Like, this talks about a wholesale change of perspective that is required by you, right? And this isn't just the way that you see the world. That will be a corollary of the changes that are actually being called, which is a changing of the way that you view yourself, how you experience being you. It says to me that December's got shadow work plenty coming up to the surface for you, because this Chariot is looking to integrate both aspects of these into your movement forwards. You know, the Chariot speaks to polarities, so we've got night and day and good and bad, and, you know, the light and the shadow. Everything has its opposite, you know. I was reading a really interesting thing a couple of days ago. I think it was Heraclitus. And it was called, it's a theory called Pantarei. I actually called Virgo's reading that. And it translates as everything flows. And there's all sorts of different ways of interpreting what he might have meant by that. People have given considerable amount of time over to interpreting what it means. But there's this sense, and this is what I really liked. You know, when I talk about the Death card, and I talk about endings and beginnings, and how they're basically the same fucking thing. You know, it was talking about how everything is just on this loop, and there's what I was thinking about, right? So whether you're going up or whether you're going down, it's all part of the same cycle, and it is essentially the same thing. What I was thinking about the Hanged Man was the truth of something can often be found in its opposite. There's a very wise man that I know said that to me, and I found it to be a very useful tool. Because is that not what the Hanged Man's doing, right? He's looking for the truth of something in that which he already knows, but is viewing from a different perspective, right? So he needs to look to the opposite. It is not that the truth is the opposite of what you think. It is that it is in its opposite. So, for example, taking a position, intellectually speaking, that is totally opposite from yours, and then working out what it is that triggers you really, really hard about that position. And this could be everything, but we are talking about your identity. So let's say, for example, about the fighting, right? Where Aries needs to fight everything. I think it's actually broadly it's a fire sign thing. Sagittarius quite often would just fuck off. They won't fight because they get bored and they're just like, fuck you, I'm going to go do something else. But I feel like Aries and Leo do have that in them, right, really quite strongly. And it's something that becomes a point of pride. We will fight everything. We will fight the world. Hit it all head on, you know. Now, what if all of that... What if that is in some way masking something else? We get triggered by it because we're proud of it. And we're proud of it because it's something that we've taken front and centre and put as a part of our identity. There it is. I'm a fighter. I'm not a quitter. I'm not any of these things. How challenging would you find it to consider the possibility that fighting is the thing that is making your life hard at the moment? And that actually there wasn't any value in fighting everything. And in fact, what it was doing was stopping you from looking at you yourself, you know, and considering a change of position that might be required by you. I mean, I'm seeing both of these themes coming on here with the Chariot and the Hanged Man. And I'm using fighting as an example because I think it's a pretty good one when it comes to Aries, right? Quite combative. Certainly, you know, that initiatory energy of like sparking a fight. Or certainly reacting. But what does that give you? Because if what it does is it comforts you because you win or you get to be right, then that's an ego position. And it's nothing to do with your personal growth. If anything, it's quite the reverse. It retards your growth. Because, for a start, if you're getting triggered at all, I mean, there's a big sign right there. And triggers are your friends. I will say this over and over again. If you're at a point where you can acknowledge a trigger and then work with it to see where it originated and why it's there and what it's been trying to protect you from, I think it can be the most incredibly insightful thing that you can have happen at you. It's your own personal trigger. Obviously, if it's a trigger that is significant enough to bring on something like a panic attack or something like that, then you should seek professional assistance with that. You know, don't be taking all of your information from tarot readers. But I'm working on an assumption that emotions are running high, but you are more or less in a state of okayness, right? Interrogating our shadow and seeing why it is that we need to defend ourselves so hard. I wonder if potentially over-defend, speaking to a sense of hypervigilance, hyper-awareness, hypersensitivity, biting things before they get a chance to bite you, you know, and savaging them. What it's suggesting is that what is sitting underneath it is fear. It's fear of other people, it's fear of circumstances, it's fear of the control that people have, the lack of control that you have. You know, we saw that Emperor card coming up before, and I think that that's important, because I think that there's been a lot of you trying to control things that are very clearly falling down around you. And the point is, every time you look to something outside of you to fight, you miss what's going on inside. Because you don't need to fight the world, Aries. You actually don't need to. It's not necessary. What we're looking for is a sense of peace. And that doesn't feel to me like it's anywhere near close to you at the moment, because you are keeping it at arm's length. You know, it is the Two of Swords. It is what you do not see. Tell me about this Empress here. For some of you, there's a lot here that originates with the relationship that you had with your mother. It's as simple as that. And that makes sense when we're talking about emotion. Mother is the word for God on the lips of small children and all that kind of thing, right? Our mothers shape us in a way that no other influence really in the world does. And they do it from a really early stage, like pre-verbal, you know? If you've watched any of my videos on the shadow, like, we got into how the shadow is formed and where it comes from. But there's a theme that's been coming up month in and month out for probably the last 3 or 4 months for you, Aries, and it is that sense of abandonment. Now, the question for me here when I'm looking at all of these is, how far has that fear of abandonment that has come from past experiences has now factored its way into your reactions to everything that happens? And they are reactions. Right? What we don't have is thought through responses. We've just got reacting and being hypervigilant and waiting for the next attack and then reacting again. It's like you're almost scared to be vulnerable. You're scared to be comfortable. You're scared to be it's there, like, you're scared to be vulnerable. Because your life experiences up until this point have shown you that being vulnerable ends up with you being, in some way, fucked over at some point. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. Because all of the work that's being highlighted here is on your perception of yourself. How you sit inside your skin, Aries. So whether it's to do with your mother and the relationship that you have with your mother, and for a lot of you that is going to be the case, there's a broader question here of the kind of value that you find in relationships. How do you show up in relationships? What do you bring to the table? What do you expect from relationships? Because I feel like expectation is high with you. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, expectations are premeditated disappointments. And all of this action for the sake of action is taking you away from the essential point, which is that something inside you needs to change, and change dramatically. And I feel like, with this Chariot card and the Devil here, that it is absolutely related to shadow, what you are actually afraid of. You know, I'm just looking at these cards here. It was really beautiful how this Chariot card's sitting here, and it's the point of integration between here and here. So we have, destruction, and then we have things being rebuilt. We have a goal, we have things kind of being brought into alignment. And then here we've got this Black Sphinx, and we've got the Devil here, and we've got the Light Sphinx, and we've got the Empress here. Like, there's a balance here for you that needs to come in. Because you are operating from a place of fear at this point, and a refusal. There's the Tower again. I'll take this as validation of what I'm saying. a refusal to show up without the weapons. And I don't just mean in your personal relationships, although that is absolutely the case, whether they be intimate or not. I'm talking about the relationship that you have with yourself. There's no energy here of just vibing, right? Because people who are living life on survival mode do not just sit and vibe because they expect to get eaten. The problem is, though, is that this means the possibility of any kind of security and stability for you is always very brittle. It doesn't hold much weight because at any point you're expecting it to be taken away from you again. Now, we've done a lot of work on this channel over the last couple of years about pointing out to people that all this it's just atoms vibrating at a particular density. What is important for me, the reason why I feel like we are here, one of the major reasons why we are here is not only to learn, but to push our soul to grow and understand that the security and the stability needs to be within us. And so that is balance and equilibrium as well. That is holding all parts of us in equal alignment, making friends with your shadow and not being throttled by your subconscious all the time. That's saying you need to fight, you need to fight, you need to fight because you're fucking exhausted, Aries. And you've been exhausted for nigh on 2 fucking years now. And you're not letting it go because you don't know how to do anything else. Now the problem with that is that you are not going to learn how to do anything else until you wrestle back control from your subconscious, because all of this is an illusion, right? All of it hinges on a change of perception for you. Now, when you're living continually in a state of expecting to be ambushed by people, there's a knock-on effect with that. The first is you don't invest in people, not properly, But everything coming from a place of fear means that you don't relax, you don't vibe, you don't just sit and have fun. Everything's got to be overanalyzed. And once you've jumped to a conclusion, and often you do jump to a conclusion, Aries, what comes then after is a huge knee-jerk reaction, which might actually see you walking away from things that could have given you comfort and succor. But ultimately, that comfort and succor and stability and security needs to sit in here. So you need to be able to say, well, do you know, it doesn't really matter what anybody does. I'm cool. Doesn't matter what the tower hits me with, right? It's probably going to be quite painful and it's going to be quite stingy, but I'm cool. It's a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity for growth. Here I am growing and evolving. And if there's one thing that is consistent in this world, and I think there's probably only one thing that is consistent, it is that everything changes. Pantarei. Everything flows. You never put your foot in the same stream twice. Even if, you don't move from the spot that you're in. Like the water's changing, the water's flowing, everything's happening around you. What's being called to change here, Aries, is you, not your circumstances. It's the defensiveness. It's the hypersensitivity. It's the hyper-awareness of the possibility that somebody might be coming to attack you. Instead of a resolute knowing that sits deep in your soul that, if anybody comes and tries to attack you, that they're not going to get anywhere with it. It's a waste of your energy. And worse than that, it might see you projecting behaviours that you're expecting to see from people onto others, rather than dealing with actually what is in front of you, because it's all a perceptual problem. So when we've got what's coming towards you in December, I feel like we've got a ton of realizations hitting you. The King of Wands is here, and so I feel like there's going to be a continuance of action, doing all sorts of things without necessarily the consideration of what's going on underneath that. Like I said, the thing that's bothering me about this reading is the fact that the Queen of Wands is not here. We're kind of skipping that altogether. And it's quite an interesting actually, let's get into this here while we're on YouTube, because this is the sort of thing that I would talk about in the extended. But so the Queen of Wands is another one of those cards which for me was a little bit baffling for the longest time, much like the King of Pentacles, not King of Pentacles, the Queen of Pentacles being Capricorn and the King of Cups being in Scorpio. And you look at the meanings and what they're supposed to represent, and the astrology that they're also supposed to represent. King of Cups, there's somebody who is in charge of their own emotions. They don't let their emotions rule them, but they're very open and very loving and very giving, and they're not afraid to be vulnerable and all that sort of thing. And I was reading this and I was like, I know a shitload of Scorpios, and that's bollocks. That's literally the opposite of what a Scorpio is. And then there's the Queen of Pentacles, right? She understands the value of investing in herself, nurturing herself. She is the Queen of self-care. I'm like, I know shitloads of Capricorns and they fucking hate themselves. They all hate themselves. But it was while I was having this same thought that I realised that it's a goal. It doesn't mean that those are the attributes with which they were born, those traits that they demonstrate to everybody. You know, this is the highest vibration of that sign, is when they're being what the card says that they're supposed to be. So for a Capricorn to come to a place where they don't fucking hate themselves anymore, and actually they're quite comfortable with themselves, and they invest in themselves and they take care of themselves, that's huge. Monumental growth. For a Scorpio to get to the point where their emotions don't overwhelm them all of the time to the extent that they have to lock them down and never consult them, huge growth. Massive growth. Now the Queen of Wands is another one of those. So the Queen of Wands is Aries, and as we know, Aries is all about, you know, snapping, being first. You know, it's the initiatory spark of something, always pointing the way, because you are cardinal fire, right? But then the Queen of Wands is confident and dynamic and bold, and she takes action when she needs to, but she also knows when not to. And the Queens are about this internal experience of whatever element that they represent. The Kings are the external expression. So while Aries is going off in all sorts of different directions and effectively being more like a king than a queen, what is missing is that internal experience of why these things are happening in the first place. Why am I doing these things in the first place? Because I feel like that's the realm of the Queen of Wands. So if Aries, you're doing things because you have to be doing things, because you have to be busy, because you cannot sit with your own thoughts for too long without feeling a sense of rage or anger or sadness, then here's the point of growth for you. It's right there. It's all in the internal experience. I mean, this says to me that actually there's very little that you need to be doing outside of yourself. All of the work is within. And I see it there with the Ace of Cups in reverse. It's the water in the cup that is emotion in the tarot. Right? The cup is just a receptacle for it. It's just a vessel for it. But if that cup is upside down, then no water is ever going to get into that cup. It's never going to be able to sit in there. And what you want is this. Now this is a healthy, functioning relationship with self, where you don't need the approval or praise of other people to feel good about yourself. You don't need to fight people and win to feel good about yourself. You can just sit and vibe and feel all right with yourself. Yeah, card is a Chariot of the Self as well. It's all in here. So it doesn't matter if somebody does something or they don't do something, or they say something or they don't say something, right? You don't take any of this stuff personally. And I feel like the issue is that everything has been taken personally. And now there's actions that are going off in all sorts of directions where you're trying to either mitigate the effect of the tower or make sure that the tower doesn't get anywhere near you in the first place, except that in doing that, you are literally creating the perfect environment for the tower to hit. Aries, you have no love for yourself. And there's a reason for that. There's an originating point. There's probably a myriad of originating points for that. And until you get to the root of what those are, and that, I'm afraid, involves shadow work, you are not going to be able to turn that cup the right way around and start filling it with anything meaningful. You know, this is absolutely resonating in a vibration of fear. The world's going to come and get me. I've got to be ready to fight at all times. I'm going to get ambushed. Something's going to come out of the bushes and it's going to eat me, and I have to get ahead of it, all of it. And it's like, no, actually, you know, I spoke to you last year about something that I've noticed about Sagittarius and Aries, and that is that they both move forwards, right? Relentlessly forwards, never stopping. And with both of them, what I realised is that there was a big difference between having a goal and moving towards it. Being like, that's where I'm going. And moving forward for the sake of it, so that you don't have to look backwards, so that you don't have to look inwards. Like Aries and Sagittarius both have at points, and I feel like, you know, it's a thing, run away from their pasts, run away from their emotions, locked them down. You know, with Sagittarius, sex, drugs and rock and roll. With Aries, it's like making sure that you don't feel like anybody else feels like they have power over you or they have control over you. Now, that's a you thing, Aries. That's not a situation outside of you. That's how you perceive what is going on. And in the perception of things being that way, what you're doing is you're giving away your power. I am frightened that you might think that you have power over me, so now I have to do a load of things to make sure that you know that you don't. That's a reaction. That's you resonating from a place of fear. You being like, I'm going to go do my thing. I'm doing my thing over here. You know, come along if you like. And if you do something crappy, then that's on you. Like, it says more about you than it does about me. But it doesn't happen like that. Like, you take it into the core of you and it becomes then an absolute full frontal assault on your identity. And you must redress that balance up here. That's like, you've got to do that because your whole identity and your ego is riding on it. It's all a cover for this, Aries. You know, this Nine of Wands is a card of, it's the same card here, but look at the difference. This man is injured and he looks hunted and he's waiting for the next fucking attack. You know, we talk about this card being boundaries and resilience and all that sort of thing, right? Does he look resilient? Well, yeah, he's probably got there, but he actually looks to me like he needs a fucking rest. He needs a bit of peace in his life. He needs to put down the need to fight everything. And look at the difference in this card here. The boundaries are still there, but she looks pretty well rested. She's got her mucky clothes on for doing stuff out in the garden, but she's created a whole fucking rose bush down here. Not everything has to be a fight, Aries. And it particularly doesn't have to be a fight with other people to avoid you having a fight with yourself. If you can tend to your boundaries and tend to yourself, tend to what is going on inside of you, then you've got more of a chance of putting this the right way up. But it's constantly running on empty. It's abandonment issues. You know, and abandonment issues aren't just, please don't leave me, please don't go away. It's also, I expect you to run away, and I expect you to leave me, and I expect you to fuck me over. I expect you to do something that threatens my sense of identity and threatens my sense of power, and I expect that I'm going to have to do something about that at some point. I expect you to treat me like a piece of shit. And the thing is that I've said this before, we judge ourselves by our intentions and other people by our actions. So just flip that around a second, Aries. Just for a second. And imagine a world where you were judging other people by their intentions and yourself by your actions. I think it's a really good place to start with shadow work. Look at everything that you've done, pick particular bits and flip it around. Start feeling around for other people's perceptions in this. Not because yours are so completely wrong and you have to take other people's on board, but actually because in order to be balanced, you need to see things from all sides. I think that this is some sort of, I'd like to say it's a breakthrough moment and that you'll pop through the other side in December, like really, really getting it, but I'm not sure that you will. Yeah. I think that you can expect this month to be really challenging, because there's certainly nothing new taking off. There's nothing new coming in until you work out how to turn each one of these aces the right way up. Like you feel to me to be held to be static now. It's like you're not going anywhere. You're going to have to deal with this. You're going to have to deal with what scares you and what gives you anxiety. And you're going to have to look at the reason why you fight everything. I heard Jordan Peterson watching a thing of his once, and he said, it's a really dangerous thing to have pride in some particular aspect of yourself, right? Have pride in who you are, because that becomes toxic very, very quickly, because it stops you from, when the time comes to grow and change and evolve, as we all must do at all times, it stops you letting go of that thing that you were previously proud of. It keeps you stuck. Now, if you're proud of the way that you fight everything in the world, because your perception of how the world is and what must be done, because you're resonating in a place of fear, if the time comes not to fight, then who are you and what do you do with yourself? When that essential part of who you are is taken away, you're like, fuck, who am I? We can even see this in terms of the psychotic independence that I've talked about. My ex called me psychopathically independent, and I was pleased. I was really pleased. I giggled. I was like, that's really funny. And it was only years later where I realised what the extent of that actually meant. Here is someone who is so fucking traumatized, who is so used to having to do things by themselves that it doesn't even occur to them to ask for help. They have a fear of appearing needy, because at some point they reached out their hand and they asked for help, and somebody told them, fuck off, stop being so emotional, stop being so needy, why do you make everything all about you? Why do you think you're so important? That is traumatizing, and the response to that is go, okay, so now I understand that what I need to do is not ask anyone for help. Maybe I don't, if somebody offers help, I need to absolutely refuse it, because they might see me as something other than absolutely independent, right? You've taken something which is healthy independence, and it has become contorted, distorted into something else. And maybe you judge other people really hard for asking for help. Maybe you decide that they are needy. I'm talking about projection here. Like, I would love to give you a better message, a more sunshine and rainbows and unicorns message, Aries. But this feels like it's a crunch month for you. If things have been hard, it looks like they might well get harder, because you're digging your heels in. You're being stubborn. And I get it. because assaults on identity are difficult to fucking deal with. And if the Tower comes and it starts pulling away who you actually think you are, that's a very distressing situation, because you have to put yourself back together, which means you have to actually get to know bits of yourself that you would rather not. And that's why you put them in the shadow in the first place. I think this is a month for being quiet, Aries. And it's a month for asking yourself a series of very challenging questions and being radically honest with yourself about the answers. You know, any one of the number of questions that I've asked you just during the course of this reading, God, I've been banging on for ages. But I think that this is really important, because the Tower will not be resisted. So it might not whip anything new away from you, but it's going to certainly stop you from moving forwards in any kind of meaningful way. Like, you're not getting out of this until you deal with what you see here. Until you allow yourself to see what it is that your subconscious is choosing not to let you see at this point. It's kind of heavy. But the point is to get you to the Fool. And if you're going to get to the Fool, Aries, then you need to drop the concrete boots. And so what you have here this month is a very long, slow process of chipping those off. You know, hammer and a chisel if you're lucky. If not, then maybe you just got to kind of kick the wall a few times to see if you can try and get them off that way. And from then there's going to be a period of healing that needs to happen, because your bare feet have been in concrete boots, and that's really fucking uncomfortable. Alright, I'm going to leave it here. I'm going to go over to Vimeo, and we're going to look at December specifically and see what's going on. There might be a couple of, initializing, catalyzing events that kind of bring all of this to the full. Or it could just be the way that the energy works on you this month. But we're going to go and have a look at it. So if you would like to join me, that's the link in the description box, the first link. And don't forget about the 6-month overviews, because I think that they're really, really important. The level of accelerated growth that I saw for every single one of the signs means that this is going to be a bumpy ride for all of us, and it's going to feel pretty uncomfortable at times. And I happen to think that forewarned is forearmed. So, check those out. Also, come and check out Circle if you'd like to do that as well, because like I said, the Tower's been hitting everybody in one way or another, and we can all support each other through this. Radical honesty, though, Aries, and really leaning into the uncomfortable places. That's the takeaway from this. So, know that I love you all very, very much, and I'll see you soon.